Let's learn something about mirrors today. What are mirrors made up of? If you're standing in front of your dressing room mirror and you're wondering what are the materials that actually go into making a mirror, you might look at it and say, it looks like it's made of glass. But then the question is, glass is supposed to be a transparent material. Whatever light falls on it actually goes through it so that you can see through glass, you can see what's on the other side of the glass. But in that sense, mirror is quite opposite of it. Mirror is opaque, it doesn't let light that falls on it go through it, but in fact reflects it back at you. You can see yourself in the mirror. So that makes you wonder, there has to be something more to a mirror than just being a piece of glass. So that's exactly what we are looking into today. But before going into the details of what the modern day mirrors are made up of, I would like to point out that mirrors in olden days were quite different. I mean, people just took these chunks of metal, like, precious metal like silver or gold or copper, even aluminum, and sometimes alloys like bronze, and polish their surfaces really smooth and shiny. And once they have surfaces like that, they become mirrors. And but you can imagine that using metals like silver and gold, these mirrors were extremely expensive to make, and they were not a common man commodity back then. It was mostly owned by rich folks, the ruling classes. But as time went by, people realized that you don't need big chunks of these expensive metal to make mirrors out of them. You just need a thin film of silver or gold or copper, and that, as long as it doesn't have any defects or any roughness or irregularities or asperities on the surface, it's good enough to make a mirror out of it. But for that, you need a solid base material which is cheap and inexpensive, and then you could potentially just coat a thin film of metal on top of that and make a mirror out of it, which is what actually happened. And I'm going to explain to you in a little detail how mirrors are made and how they led to the modern day mirrors. Again, so this is a piece of glass, and as I said, light goes through it. But then if you come and just spray it with a thin film of metal or coat it with metal on it, so what happens is light rays actually go through the glass but then are stopped by the metal that's on the back side. So and then they get reflected back, and that's how it becomes a mirror. So the process of coating a thin film of metal on the back side of the glass is often referred to as silvering process. And the term silvering doesn't necessarily refer to just silver. I mean, it's a generic term that applies to all the processes that involve coating the glass with any of these metals that I've mentioned here. So it's just a generic term that's used in process of mirror making. So you might wonder why I keep saying that a coating of metal on the back side of the glass, because that doesn't make any sense, because glass doesn't have a front or the back side. It's the same on either sides, but there's a reason why I'm differentiating between front and back sides here. I call it back side because you're actually looking at it from the glass side of the mirror and not from the metal side of the mirror. You can also view it from this side, from the metal side, and let's see, if you have light rays that are falling directly on the metal surface, what would you expect will happen? It's a thin reflective metal film, so you would expect that it'll reflect the light rays back, and it's as good a mirror as it is on the other side. In fact, it might actually be better because there is no glass in between. On this side there is glass through which the light has to actually go through the glass before it hits the metal surface, which is the reflective part of the mirror. But on this side you don't have to do that. Light directly falls on it and gets reflected back from it. So but there are some downsides to having mirrors that are actually they call front side or front surface mirrors. And what are the downsides to it? So one of them is basically either silver or aluminum or whatever metal coating that you're talking about. It's very thin, so structurally it's a fragile material. I mean, it over time there is a possibility that metal film flakes off and falls, and which would actually degrade the performance of the mirror itself. So that is one downside. The other downside is, for example, typically for metal coatings like silver, what happens is silver oxidizes quickly when exposed to air, and not only that, it tends to absorb sulfur from the surrounding air, and or sulfur containing compounds like hydrogen sulfide, for example, and forms this black film called a silver sulfide, and this is actually referred to as tarnish. So oftentimes if you look at silver jewelry that's really shiny at the beginning when you buy it, and then over time it tends to develop this black film on top, and it no longer is as lustrous, and it becomes dull after some time, and that's because of this dark film that forms on top of it. So you need to actually remove that film off the silver surface to make it mirror like again. And the same thing if you have a front surface mirror, and you're trying to maintain the mirror for over a long period of time, you need to remove this tarnish from time to time, and that could be a big pain. So that's the reason why people actually with silver coatings actually go for regular backside mirrors, where the silver coating here is protected by a coat of paint on top. So silver is protected by glass on one side and paint on the other side. So light rays come this way and fall on the glass, go through the glass, and then go back and get reflected from the metal surface and then go back. But that doesn't mean that there is no use to these front side mirrors. In fact, many of these precision optical applications, like for example telescopes, they use these front side mirrors, because in those applications they actually don't want the light to travel through the glass and bend or refract before reaching the metal surface. So if you have a glass, light tends to bend or refract while entering or exiting the mirror. So if you don't want that, then you use front side mirrors. So in those cases, people actually would prefer to use aluminum, and there is a reason for that too. I mean, they would prefer to use aluminum over silver. And why is that? Because aluminum in fact also oxidizes really quickly in air and forms what is called aluminum oxide, Al2O3, also called as alumina. But the only difference here is alumina is in fact transparent, so it doesn't actually meddle with the inherent reflective nature of the aluminum metal underneath. So of course, aluminum oxide is not always transparent. If you happen to make it outside in powder form, it's in fact white in color. And so in any case, I'll stop here for now, and in the next presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the process of mirror making itself. And as I said, it's called the silvering process. And I'll also talk a bit about some really interesting concepts like two-way mirrors, for example. And meaning if you're standing in front of a two-way mirror, you see yourself in the mirror, but a person standing on the other side in a dark room actually can see you through the mirror. We'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. So see you next time then.